We call it reconciliation. There's nothing in reconciliation that precludes Republicans voting for it.
Joe Biden is totally on board with using reconciliation. I've been talking to him every day.
I support passing COVID relief with support from Republicans if we can get it, but the COVID relief has to pass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
President Biden came into Washington on promises of increasing bipartisanship. At the same time, he came into Washington with smaller majorities than we've seen in many years. That means that getting anything done along bipartisan lines will require lots of Republican votes and very few Democratic defections. One of the ways that that can be accomplished is through reconciliation.
He describes himself as a wartime president who is sort of facing the fierce urgency of this moment. What you're really seeing play out in real time is sort of bipartisan Biden grappling with his instinct to be wartime Biden.
This bill had broad bipartisan support.
It becomes reality because of the bipartisan leadership of the members of the United States Congress.
Today, after all the votes have been tallied, health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America.
Budget reconciliation is a somewhat arcane and yet increasingly frequently used tool that Congress created for itself to pass complex legislation with 50 plus 1 votes in the Senate rather than the 60 that are normally required.
There's sort of a reason why reconciliation is not used for every bit of legislation because it's a parliamentary procedure that has to do with specifics of the budget that make it an imperfect vehicle.
Prior to the most recent several administrations, reconciliation bills would often pass with some bipartisan support. It hadn't been as strictly a partisan procedure as it has become.
We will need to use reconciliation. They've chosen a totally partisan path.
Reconciliation takes away bipartisanship. Reconciliation, we can get a lot of the COVID bill done with reconciliation, and that's something we certainly will use if they try to block this immediate COVID bill.
With the last 2 presidents, they went straight to reconciliation for their first initiatives.
We have seen the reconciliation process used in several notable ways in recent years. The first came when Democrats used it to eventually pass Obamacare. Another recently came on President Trump's tax cuts. And under the Trump administration, Republicans also used this to try and repeal Obamacare. What we've seen over the last decade plus in Washington is that there isn't a whole lot of bipartisanship to be had, and that has to be playing in the Biden administration's mind when it comes to this decision.
We not only have an economic imperative to act now, I believe we have a moral obligation.
Biden comes in with lessons learned from the Obama administration, one being the Affordable Care Act, where Obama did spend weeks and months courting Republicans. In the end, there was not a single Republican voting for it. And that time that passed allowed public sentiment to build up against the legislation.
We've already lost over 450,000 people. We're going to lose a whole lot more if we don't act, and act decisively and quickly.
The White House very much believes that the health of the nation and the well-being of the nation rises and falls on how they handle this virus and the economy. And so does his presidency.
The way they've chosen to take a totally partisan approach to COVID relief, totally different from the way it was addressed by the Republican majority Senate last year, the Democrat House last year, and the Republican president last year.
This is the first major initiative of the Biden administration, and to the extent that Republicans decide it's not a good faith effort to actually work across the aisle, it could have an impact on future legislation.
If you pass a piece of legislation that breaks down on party lines, but it gets passed, it doesn't mean there wasn't unity. It just means it wasn't bipartisan. I prefer these things to be bipartisan because I'm trying to generate some consensus and take sort of the, how can I say it, the vitriol out of all of this.
Biden is sort of in 2 different worlds. And the first world is he kind of fundamentally holds all the leverage. That said, They have an incredibly narrow majority. They're walking the sort of most narrow of tightropes.